At 6, the government's long-term plans for social care and the NHS in England. Pressure grows on the Prime Minister ahead of an expected announcement tomorrow. But how will it be paid for? There's a growing Tory backlash amid reports of plans to raise national insurance to fund the changes. This man's mother had to go into residential care. He was forced to sell the family home to pay for it.
That's when you start to realise that the money that they've got saved and the money that my mum would get as well just was going to go nowhere near paying for the costs that were needed.
We'll be asking what options the government has to fund changes to the system. Also tonight, millions of children are back at school in England, Wales and Northern Ireland. No masks and no class bubbles. Raising the Taliban flag as the last remaining part of Afghanistan falls after days of heavy fighting. Spotted by a police helicopter, a 3-year-old boy missing since Friday in the Australian bush is found in a gully. And India cruised to a comfortable win against England in the 4th Test at the Oval.
And coming up on the BBC News Channel, all eyes on Emma Raducanu. The British teenager prepares for the biggest match of her career at the US Open.
Good evening and welcome to the BBC News at 6. The government is preparing to unveil its long-awaited plan for social care and the NHS in England, with the announcement expected tomorrow. But the Prime Minister is under growing pressure over how it's to be paid for. Critics say any rise in national insurance would break manifesto promises and disproportionately affect those on lower wages. Meanwhile, the Health Secretary, Sajid Javid, has tonight confirmed that the NHS will be getting an extra £5.4 billion to help it deal with the backlog of patients caused by COVID and the winter pressures over the next few months. Our first report is from our political editor, Laura Kunsberg.
The strain, the sadness, all too familiar. Steve had to sell his parents' Warwickshire house after his father passed away and his mum's dementia developed. She needed full-time care, and she still doesn't know their family home's gone.
Why did my dad bother to get himself such a decent pension and pay into a pension scheme for all that time? It doesn't seem to be worth it in the long run. My mum, with the dementia, she doesn't know that house has been sold. If she was of sound mind, but it was a body that had let her down, she had to go to home, I don't know how I would have even told her this. I don't know how I could have even sat there and said, Mum, we've sold the house, we've got this for it, and it's going to have to pay for your care.
The promise to ease that kind of heartache is familiar too, made repeatedly long before his first moment in Number 10.
We will fix the crisis in social care once and for all with a clear plan we have prepared.
But you might remember this commitment too.
We can do all these things without raising our income tax, VAT or national insurance contributions. That's our guarantee.
Forget parts of that manifesto though. Tomorrow Boris Johnson is expected to emerge to say, in fact, you can't have it all. On course to announce a rise in national insurance tax for workers and employers to raise billions, to be styled as a levy for health and social care. Alongside more than £5 billion for the NHS in England by next April.
Everyone would want to know that we are committed to our plans on adult social care and new settlement, but also today's announcement of this extra funding of £5.4 billion over the next 6 months for the NHS will really help tackle that backlog, and that's a huge priority for us.
So Downing Street's preparing to break one promise to keep another. After months of haggling, the government's expecting to announce a limit on the amount any one family in England pays towards the cost of care and pump billions into the health service to catch up after the pandemic. The exact price tag, that's not yet clear, but the resistance to how it's to be paid for, well, that certainly is. One cabinet minister told me hiking national insurance is the wrong thing to do and the wrong way to do it. Others prefer to talk seemingly about the cricket.
England have lost a third wicket, I think, is what it was at the moment.
But plenty of MPs are publicly worried.
In my view, I think raising national insurance is the wrong approach. Someone earning £30,000 a year will pay a far bigger portion of their income in national insurance than someone earning, say, £250,000.
Would you be willing to vote against it?
I haven't shied away from making my view clear. I want to give the government the freedom and the flexibility to change, but there are a significant number of colleagues, I think, who are opposed to a national insurance rise per se.
Number 10 will have to face down the opposition as well as some of their own. But waiting for change has been like watching paint dry. Downing Street knows there will be a fight, but is up for a battle to complete the job.
Yeah, it has.
To remember about all of this, caring for the most vulnerable in our society works different ways all around the country. The system's different in Scotland, Northern Ireland and Wales, and the announcement we expect tomorrow to affect England in terms of the social care system. But if, as is highly likely, the government goes ahead with the national insurance rise and spends it on social care, well, then there would also be extra money for all parts of the UK. But perhaps most importantly of all, we haven't yet seen the precise details of this, despite Westminster frothing with speculation about exactly what's going to happen, because this announcement has been so long in the making. It's going to be a few hours yet before we actually see the details in black and white. So probably this time tomorrow, Sophie, we'll be poring over the details, calculators out, trying to work out whether the proposed solutions really do fix the creaking problems in social care. Most importantly, of course, how it will really affect families around the country.
Laura Kunsberg in Westminster, thank you. Well, there are, beyond this year, big questions about how much money will be needed in the longer term to fund health and social care. NHS leaders have said that an extra £10 billion will be needed next year alone to cover day-to-day services. Our health editor Hugh Pym assesses the plans and the options.
The funding of health and social care. It's one of the biggest and trickiest issues facing ministers in all the UK's administrations. The needs of an ageing population must be addressed, and on top of that, the costs of COVID, with some vital decisions for England expected tomorrow. A 5-year spending plan for NHS England with annual increases was announced in 2018. That's what the blue line shows. The orange line shows what's happened in reality, largely because of COVID. The big question, how much more will be needed in future years?
The scale of the backlog of waiting that we're seeing already, and we're expecting to grow for many years to come as people haven't had care over the last 18 months, is going to have a profound effect on the NHS. But also, if we can't run services as efficiently as we used to because of infection control, that adds to cost.
The Treasury will have worked out what it thinks is affordable for the NHS. It's understood there's been a fierce debate with health ministers and officials over what's required to tackle the huge challenges ahead. The NHS relies on a smooth-running social care system, but the funding of care in England is another immensely complex issue. Not just how much individuals should pay, but what's required in terms of higher government funding. So where might the extra money for the NHS and social care come from? Well, national insurance has been talked about. That's paid by those in work and their employers, but not by those above retirement age. Then there's income tax, which covers income above certain limits, including what pensioners get from their investments. Other taxes include capital gains tax and VAT, but those seem less likely options. Then there's higher borrowing, but that would have to be added to already high levels of government debt.
Choosing income tax is something that no government has done other than right at the very top. Since the early 1970s, it's 50 years since we've had an increase in the main rates of income tax. Governments really hate to do that. National insurance contributions have actually risen quite a lot over the last 30 or 40 years. Governments seem keener to do that because actually the population seems happier with it.
So ministers have to decide who pays and how much. Higher health spending in England automatically means proportionate increases for Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland. Their ministers in turn need to make awkward decisions on how the money is allocated. Hugh Pym, BBC News.
Well, finding a funding solution for social care in England has been on the Conservative government's agenda for over a decade. In 2011, David Cameron set up a commission headed by the economist Andrew Dilnot to come up with proposals. They included capping total care costs at £35,000, with the state paying for everything after that point, and raising the threshold for state support to £100,000 in assets. But plans to implement these proposals were delayed and then dropped by subsequent leaders. Well, our social affairs correspondent Alison Holt is here, and there is a lot of focus on funding today, but there are much wider issues at stake here.
Yes, you're right. The focus has been on how it's paid for, but we need to know what it is we are meant to be paying for. The idea of the cap, which was outlined there, is the favourite option, the expected option. The big question will be, where is that cap set? Now, there have been arguments about whether it should be 50,000. We hear about 80,000 also being put forward. That seems to be where the smart money is at the moment. These are the details we need to know. But when we're talking about a cap on costs, it's on care costs. So if you're in residential care, it won't cover accommodation costs, just the cost of your care. So often, though, this gets reduced down to an oversimplification, an argument about selling houses. Under the current system, anyone who has assets or savings of more than £23,250 ends up paying for care themselves. It doesn't matter whether they're living in a council house they bought under the Tories' right to buy scheme or whether they're in a mansion. The current system is in crisis. It's underfunded, quality is patchy, it struggles to recruit enough staff, and in residential care, the many people who pay for themselves end up subsidising those who get council help. Also, local authorities spend about half their care budgets on younger adults with disabilities, and these plans are unlikely to address their particular needs. So the danger of too much heat and noise around just how we fund it, however important, is that we obscure those important wider discussions about what a future care system should look like, because at its best it should be about helping people live better lives for longer.
Alison Holt, thank you. Let's take a look now at the latest UK coronavirus figures, and there were just over 41,000 new infections recorded in the latest 24-hour period, which means an average of 37,698 cases per day in the last week. The latest figures show 7,606 people in hospital being treated for coronavirus. 45 deaths were reported in the latest 24-hour period. That's people who died within 28 days of a positive COVID-19 test. That takes the average number of deaths per day to 113 over the last week. On vaccinations, nearly 88.8% of people over the age of 16 have had their first jab, and nearly 80% have had both doses. Well, more than 9 million children in England, Wales and Northern Ireland are back at school this week, and the government says coronavirus cases will be monitored carefully. Cases in Scotland have risen since the school term began in the middle of August. Our education editor Branwen Jeffries has spent the day in the village of Ringmer in East Sussex as children return to the classroom.
Good morning. Good morning, Lily. Good morning.
A welcome to soothe any new term nerves.
Good morning. Hi, Mikey.
Good morning, Archie.
For Dolphin class, a return to familiar routines. Here, they don't talk about catch-up, though there will be extra help.
Here, haven't we? How many more do we need to add?
3.
The parents say social skills and confidence are the priority.
I think it's going to take a little while for children to develop those social skills again, and to reach out to new people.
They will filter through, and I just think really it's more just about their well-being and allowing children just to be children again.
I think it's been a bigger effect on the mental health, where they've been away, where things have been totally different, where, you know, formative years of their life have been completely disrupted.
Miles can remember school before COVID, but for Ella in year 2, some things will be new.
If we get to play with everyone, it's more fun, because we have more people in our games. There's more choice for who to play with, and we can hug more people.
Shake your hands and fist bumping, high fives, and all of your, the stuff that makes you feel comfortable.
Across the field at the secondary, team sports will be back this term. These year 7s more worried about fitting in than COVID.
It's a bit weirder than primary school, where I was just top of the whole school, Now I'm bottom of a bigger school, so it's just going to be a bit harder because more people and more older people and taller people, and also maybe getting lost.
As this year starts, schools are reflecting on what they've learnt from the pandemic and what to keep. So in this school, for example, the one-way system is staying, masks for assemblies and online parent evenings.
How many electrons in the outer shell?
Next year, GCSE science exams are waiting for this class. The school wants to know what Year 11 should cover.
They've only got 9 months, and so they need to know what they need to learn, and then we need to make sure that we're delivering that for them. So it's crucial at the moment.
And this is what could keep them learning in school. Testing is the first line of defence against coronavirus. Bronwyn Jeffries, BBC News, East Sussex.
Brexit checks on goods such as meat, fish and dairy products entering Northern Ireland from Great Britain were due to be tightened at the end of this month. But while we've been on air, it has just been announced that the current system of checks is being extended indefinitely, while talks continue with the EU to try to find a long-term solution. Our Ireland correspondent Emma Vardy is in Belfast, so a delay is confirmed, Emma.
That's right, Sophie. In the last few minutes, it's been announced by the UK's Brexit Minister, Lord Frost, that the introduction of lots of new checks and paperwork on goods arriving here at Northern Ireland's ports will now be delayed indefinitely. And you may feel like we've been here before, because back in March and in June of this year, the UK government already pushed back these deadlines, and the problems remain the same. That many businesses here, particularly supermarkets, say there'll be big problems with the supply of food to Northern Ireland if they didn't. Now, the situation between the UK and the EU is that the two sides are still pretty far apart when it comes to resolving this. The UK wants a fundamental renegotiation of all these rules, while the EU says it will allow some flexibilities. But as we heard from Ireland's Deputy Prime Minister Leo Varadkar today, there is still no mood for renegotiating the Northern Ireland Protocol from the EU. Now, previously, when the UK pushed back those deadlines, there was a furious reaction from the EU. This time, the indications are that the EU knows it's coming, so there won't be the same fireworks. But it's difficult to see where all of this row ends up, really, because we know that the Brexit Minister for the UK, Lord Frost, believes that the threshold for the UK simply overriding this part of the Brexit deal has been reached. That's called triggering Article 16. It's still considered the most drastic option, so the UK says it's going to continue talking, isn't going to push that button just yet.
Emma Vardy, thank you. The time is coming up to 6:20, our top story this evening. How to pay for social care. Pressure is growing on the Prime Minister ahead of an expected announcement tomorrow. And coming up, jubilation as a 3-year-old boy who'd been missing for days in Australia is finally found.
Coming up in Sports Day on the BBC News Channel, bizarre scenes in Brazil as their match with rivals Argentina is suspended. 4 Argentinian Premier League-based players are marched off the pitch by Brazilian officials over alleged COVID breaches.
In Afghanistan, the Taliban say they have taken control of the last area, Panjshir, which has been holding out against their rule. The Taliban have released a video of their flag being raised in the centre of the provincial capital. The leader of the resistance fighters has called for a national uprising against the Taliban. Our diplomatic correspondent James Landau reports.
This is the moment the Taliban claimed victory in Panjshir, the last bastion of opposition to its rule in Afghanistan. In a video released by the group, fighters raised their flag at the provincial headquarters northeast of Kabul. In the capital, a spokesman said the Taliban had achieved all the goals of its war.
We have captured Panjshir with the will of God. The local leaders and religious elders have been coordinating with us, and our operations went ahead with their help.
But forces resisting the Taliban in this mountainous stronghold denied the claims, their spokesman saying the group's fighters were only in a few valleys and still facing concerted opposition. 3 weeks after seizing Kabul, the new rulers have yet to form a government. At the airport, some normality is resuming, with a few flights taking off, but none as yet heading overseas.
Prime Minister!
At Westminster, MPs accused the government of failing to do enough to help Afghans wishing to come to Britain.
We are going to do everything we can to help those who wish to have a safe passage out of Afghanistan. And that is why we will continue with our international friends and partners to apply whatever pressure we can, economic, diplomatic, on the Taliban to ensure that they comply with that, Mr. Speaker, as they have said that they will.
The man who first sent British forces into Afghanistan said, despite the withdrawal, the West should still be ready to put boots on the ground to defend itself.
In my view, Islamism, both the ideology and the violence, is a first-order security threat. It operates in many different arenas and dimensions. And like it, its defeat will come ultimately through confronting both the violence and the ideology by a combination of hard and soft power.
As it is, the Taliban are still facing some internal challenges to their ideology, with women here in the northern city of Mazar-e-Sharif demanding a presence in the future government. James Landale, BBC News.
A 3-year-old boy who was missing for days in Australian bushland has been found alive. He was spotted scooping water from a creek in a deep gully in New South Wales. He'd wandered away from his parents last Friday. Here's our correspondent in Sydney, Shaima Khalil.
The coordinates, my side of the boy. Degrees, minutes, seconds, format.
A glimpse of hope.
I got the boy.
4 days after this toddler disappeared in the unforgiving bushland of New South Wales. The moment Anthony El-Falak, known as AJ, was found by rescue teams, spotted from a helicopter, drinking water from a creek in the heat, 500 metres from his family's rural home in the Hunter Valley, in an area that had been searched several times. His mom, Kelly, overwhelmed by relief. 4 days after he went missing, finally reunited with her child. Hundreds worked tirelessly, scouring this rugged remote terrain. Rescue teams with air support, search dogs and divers, as well as AJ's family and friends. Many feared the worst, wondering how a lone 3-year-old could survive in this dangerous bushland. Then came news of his rescue.
Thanks God. Thank you for everyone.
He was taken straight for a medical checkup. His father said little AJ had some nappy rash and ant bites, but was in reasonably good shape.
What sustained you through all of this?
Just to see my son.
A huge relief. A family's nightmare turned into what they describe as their miracle. Shaima Khalil, BBC News, Sydney.
Several young children were among a large group of migrants brought ashore today by a lifeboat after attempting to cross the English Channel. A packed RNLI vessel was seen arriving on a beach in Dungeness in Kent. Yesterday saw the first small boat crossings for more than 2 weeks due to bad weather. Storage limits for eggs, sperm and embryos will go up to 55 years under government plans that ministers say will give people greater choice over when to start a family. Currently, after 10 years, prospective parents must decide whether to undergo fertility treatment or have the cells destroyed unless samples have been stored due to medical procedures such as chemotherapy for cancer. A Dutch court has begun hearing from the families of those killed when a Malaysian airliner, flight MH17, was shot down over rebel-held eastern Ukraine 7 years ago. 3 Russians and 1 Ukrainian national are accused of murdering the 298 people on board. Russia has denied any involvement. One of the leading opposition figures in Belarus has been sentenced to 11 years in prison for her role in mass protests against President Alexander Lukashenko. Maria Kolesnikova was convicted of extremism and plotting to seize power, along with the lawyer Maxim Znak. US and EU officials have criticised the ruling, saying it shows a disregard for human rights. Crucial climate talks being hosted by the UK are now less than 2 months away. Today, the UK government minister in charge of the conference, Alok Sharma, has been meeting his counterparts in China. As the world's fastest growing economy and a major polluter too, China will be an important voice at the negotiating table. So what are the main challenges facing those trying to forge a new agreement at the talks in Glasgow? Our science editor, David Shukman, has this assessment.
Year after year, the countries of the world have gathered for huge conferences on climate change. I've seen how a few have gone badly wrong, like in Copenhagen in 2009. Delegates walked out amid confusion and a lack of progress. Well, the first challenge is to make sure that there are steep and rapid cuts in emissions of the gases heating the planet, something that hasn't happened so far. Back in the early 90s, when climate negotiations started, about 35 billion tonnes of greenhouse gases were being emitted into the atmosphere every year. And since then, despite all the talking, those emissions have just kept climbing. Now, with all the plans and promises to cut them, they could fall to about 46 billion tonnes a year by 2030, but the science is incredibly clear that they need to come down far more than that if we're to have any chance of heading off the worst effects of higher temperatures, which is why this is such a crucial issue for the talks in Glasgow. Next, there's the highly sensitive question of financial help for the poorest and most vulnerable countries. Delivering this is long overdue. It's developing nations like the Philippines that are hardest hit by the violent weather made more frequent and intense by climate change. More than a decade ago, they were promised $100 billion a year. Vital, they say, to help them adapt to more dangerous conditions.
We want to see adaptation finance flowing to climate vulnerable nations that bear the brunt of extreme weather events or climate change, but had no reason to cause it.
A third major challenge for Glasgow is finalising the rules for measuring and trading carbon. Previous meetings failed to reach agreement. This matters because as countries try to cut their emissions, there needs to be a way of accounting for that. Likewise, if forests are left intact and the trees keep storing carbon, that has to be recorded so the carbon credits can be traded. It's vital to sort this out.
Right now, for example, if a major company wanted to, say, invest in preserving standing forest in the Amazon, there's not yet any clarity on whether those credits that would be generated from that can be claimed by Brazil as well as by the company making that investment.
So as Glasgow prepares for thousands of delegates, there's a lot at stake. COVID makes it all more difficult, and there are just 8 weeks to get ready. David Schuckman, BBC News.
Cricket now, and India have won the 4th test against England at the Oval. England were chasing a record 368 runs on the final day, but were bowled out for 210. India now have a 2-1 lead in the series with 1 test left to play. Our sports correspondent Jo Wilson was watching.
Look into my eyes, we've got this. Just 10 wickets to take and the whole day. Thus was India's perspective. England saw a long march towards 368, not steps but runs. 100 without loss. Could be possible, couldn't it? An edge from Rory Burns, a catch from the wicket-keeper, and India were off. You play 5 days, it's decided by seconds and centimetres. What a game. Hasib Hamid set off here. David Malan was reacting, sprinting, stretching, not enough. Run out. Hamid made 63 hours of work and then this. Undone by Ravi Jadeja. Now watch those stumps. They're about to meet Jasprit Bumrah. Ollie Pope gone for 2. Johnny Bairstow did not score. Bumrah was unplayable and the Oval danced. How many now? Moeen Ali caught and gone for none, 6 down. But if England couldn't win, they could still defy and draw. Look, there's still Joe Root. There's still a chance to stop India taking those wickets. There's England's captain, gone for 36. Some strokes make the whole picture. India knew it was their match now. It ended with a faint touch from Jimmy Anderson's bat. 210 all out. India are 2-1 up in the series, and yes, there is yet to come a final test. This week, Jo Wilson, BBC News.
Weather now with Thomas Schaffernacker and something of a mini heatwave.
Yeah, why not? We can call it that, I guess. Certainly temperatures are going to be rising over the next couple of days or so. In fact, today we already got up to almost 29 degrees. So summer heat returns. That's the headline. The hot air is coming in from the south, but it's going to be short-lived. By the time we get to Thursday, the temperatures will be quite a bit lower. Now, we probably will hit 30 degrees over the next couple of days. If we do, it'll be the hottest spell, the highest temperature since the 23rd of July. So we've had a prolonged period of not having 30 degrees at all. Quite unusual, really, to go through August, the whole of August, and not have 30 degrees. Anyway, a balmy start to the day in the morning, 15, 16 degrees, north or south. We wake up to tons of sunshine. Any mist will quickly fade. A bit of cloud, I think, in the northwest of the UK with this Atlantic cloud rolling in. But on the whole, it's sunshine across the vast majority of the UK. Mid-high 20s as far north as Yorkshire, mid-20s in Scotland, 30 degrees possible in the Midlands. And I think Wednesday is going to be every bit as hot across central parts of the UK. But notice the lightning flashes there indicating thunderstorms reaching southwestern parts of the UK. A slightly fresher air. Well, I say slightly, I mean, look at the temperature difference. 19 degrees in Plymouth, still 29. That's a big temperature contrast. There's going to be a nasty weather front there, bringing some big downpours and thunder and lightning. That's going to spread across the country Wednesday night. So this is Wednesday night into Thursday. You can see the thrust of the showers moves out towards the west and the north, but I think almost anywhere possible, those downpours on Thursday, and quite a bit low, those temperatures. We're back into the low 20s, maybe some of that heat hanging on into East Anglia. But yeah, a brief spell, let's call it a mini heatwave.
Enjoy it while it lasts. Thomas, thank you. And that is all from the BBC News at 6. It's goodbye from me on BBC One. We join the BBC's news teams where you are. Goodbye.